Hello and welcome to the second and final episode of the Leinster Rugby podcast for this week as we reflect on an epic Investec Champions Cup final. After over 100 pulsating minutes of action in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, one of which would had as many cards as it had tries, the Aristocrats of Toulouse claimed a record-extending sixth European crown with a 31-22 victory, while Leinster fell at the final hurdle for the third consecutive year. With me this afternoon to reflect on the game and the season at large are dejected Leinster fans, Jeff Pagano, host of the Heartland Rugby podcast, and our veteran guest, David Cordio. Welcome on, lads.
Hi, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
I should, before we get in there, mentioned Jeff did the post Heineken final last year. David did the post England game this year in the Six Nations. These things are decided in advance. And I don't want to cut you out of the rotation, but I might just need to give you like Italy games and zebra games anymore to make sure that these things run smoothly. No. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is.
So you're saying it's our fault, basically.
Okay, something like that, yeah.
Somewhere Leo Cullen's looking at Kalon's schedule sheet and going, "Oh, God damn it."
That's where we did it.
I was wondering what the anonymous thing in the top corner was of someone tracking the sheets. So that makes sense now. Before we begin, lads, it was an all-time final. It's important to get to that before we touch on how it unfolded. Jeff, I'll start with yourself. Great game. As I said, went to extra time. The third time in history. I got that part wrong on Twitter last night. Just an unbelievable final, an unbelievable occasion in a great venue.
Well, I actually think it was shite. Can that just be my answer?
You can, yeah.
No, seriously, no. Look, obviously, we're recording at lunchtime on the Sunday, so obviously it's still a bit raw for me. I'm still in that zone where I'm still seeing the match as a Leinster fan first. I mean, I know it was a worldie of a final for the neutral in every respect, but, given the recent history, I'm probably the last person to give an objective opinion right now. Very disappointed. Of course, looking at past finals being so close, to lose this one in extra time, especially when there are several areas when we definitely could have won it, it's tough, Probably the hardest part of the result to take right now is the winning margin, because, I mean, in no way was that a 9-point match when you see that as the final score. But, I suppose we'll get into that later. But sure, that's where I am at the moment.
David, I might just jump across to you for this one because we mentioned before we hit record, we were all at the final last year. So it changes your perception of things. But watching from home or from wherever you were in Dublin, what did you make of this final?
It was two of the probably most evenly matched teams you could want in the final. I think that was particularly noticeable in the fact that Toulouse and Leinster are both teams that are kind of renowned for having, very flashy attacks. They score a lot of tries. They're not the Leinster might be kind of leaning towards it with Nina Barry in saddle now, but they're not teams that are really grinded out machines, even though they have power players. They do like to get it wide. They do like to, through Antoine Dupont, through Gibson Park, they do like to score tries. They do like to put on a bit of a show for the crowd. And the fact that we went 80 minutes and no tries were scored is a testament to how effectively both teams neutralized each other. And so then it came down to, it was always going to be a game of inches. And I have to agree, the 9-point margin just does not do justice to what a narrow game it was in the end. I thought it was very telling that there were multiple occasions I saw during that game where Leinster are on the attack, they're in the opposition 22 or just outside of it, flinging passes, and this is the moment you think Leinster are going to click into game. They're going to pull out some pre-approved move. Kellen Doris is going to smash it up, and then Gibson Park will whip it wide, and suddenly they're under the sticks. And the ball that goes back to Ross Byrne goes to ground. I mean, how often would you see Leinster throw the ball to ground under not even terribly massive amounts of pressure? So I think the weight of the occasion definitely sat on both teams, and I include Toulouse in that, because once again they were very well contained. Even Wonderboy himself didn't. He had a great game. His kicking in particular was absolutely phenomenal, but neither team was able to really gain proper dominance over the other. They were just able to really hold each other at arm's length for that full 80. And if finals could be drawn, that was probably the fair result in the end. But with the extra 10 or 20 minutes and the low yellow card, Toulouse just edged it on the day.
No, I don't have it noted here, but I might just touch on it now, which is, as you mentioned, the Leinster attack versus the Toulouse defence. I think you could argue the best thing that happened to Toulouse yesterday was Pete Aki getting injured and Shoko Barras coming in and just playing unbelievable on both sides of the ball. He was brilliant for the Lebel try. He was brilliant defensively. And on that, David, like so much gets said. I remember writing a piece. I'd pre-written a piece about the 75th minute in the Ireland England game this year about the how Ireland got past Felix Jones's defence. And then when, the result gets flipped, you have to turn around and be like, okay, the English attack and whatever. And this was kind of what this game was. It wasn't really about Leinster's defence, it was about Toulouse's, and it was about Leinster's attack under Andrew Goodman, not exactly firing that many shots. Bar, I know Robbie Henshaw had a few nice touches with the Sheehan break from I don't know if it was a rip or a handling error or what it was. It was just insane. What did you make of it? What, as a Leinster fan, what do you make of the attack versus how Toulouse managed it on the other side?
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't the kind of the scintillating form we're kind of used to from Leinster. The biggest examples of there were a number of instances where Leinster could have or perhaps should have gotten tries off, but there was an instance where Joe McCarthy managed to get the ball dotted down. There was an argument about whether or not it was knocked on or whether Roman Ntamack stripped it backwards. Whether or not that try is given, obviously it might materially matter to the match. That isn't a testament to Leinster's attack. That's just opportunism. Dan Sheehan breaking down the left wing and trying to fling the ball back inside. The ball gets knocked down. It's given as I don't know, I think it goes into touch and nothing comes up in the end. But once again, he's flinging a wild pass back. Maybe James Lowe grabs it. Maybe he doesn't. Even if he does grab it, maybe he gets tackled into touch. There was nothing like the almost unstoppable kind of attack that Leinster usually deploy in situations like this. It seemed like a game of defenses. It was two teams holding each other out and waiting to see who cracked first. And if anything, I thought Toulouse had the better of the attacking form, and it was just incredible, not just rush defense, but scramble defense from Leinster that managed to hold them out. I mean, if we want to talk about instances, obviously there was the final try that won them the game, but there were at least two instances. I don't, off the top of my head, remember the name of the two Toulouse players involved. Oh, Antoine Dupont was one of them, and then on the other side, I don't remember who the other fellow was, but Antoine Dupont very, very, very nearly got the ball down in the corner, only for an incredible last second tackle from Gibson Park to force his foot into touch just before he got it down. On the other side of the pitch, Jordan Larmour did the same thing. That's the kind of attack you expect from Leinster, and it was Toulouse who were pulling it out, and it was only incredible scramble defence from Leinster that managed to hold them out in those two situations. But that could easily have been, particularly with a kicker like Blair Kinghorn, who maybe not as renowned for it as Thomas Ramos, but he was kicking pretty well off the tee that day. That could have been 14 points right there, and an extra time would never have even factored into it. Leinster never really seemed to fire those kind of shots. They got line breaks, they got upfield. There were one or two instances where you felt like, okay, maybe they can get it and they can grind it out. But I don't know if it's that Jack Nienaber has come in and defense has become more of a focus. But it definitely seemed like the attack wasn't what we were used to. So with Andrew Goodman going to Ireland now, and you hope to God that doesn't happen at Ireland level, but it'll be very interesting to see what kind of impact Tyler Blayandell can bring next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not usually one to listen to the Left Wing podcast, but I tuned into them this morning because there was no other podcast out. I wanted to get some thoughts in because I always do before I come on here, get some external thoughts. And that's where I might get you in, Jeff, because you've spoke to a lot of Leinster fans this season on Harper and Rugby. You've watched most games back multiple times to cover them. What's been your thoughts on Leinster's kind of attack and defence this season? Because as the point was made, and I think rightly so, you have to remember Andrew Goodman was at the World Cup as well, just like Shaq Nienaber was as well. Obviously, Samoa went out sooner than South Africa did. So do you think all in all it was good, or do you think there was always an element that it could come undone in a game like this against, to be fair, yeah, Toulouse are suave and they're aristocratic and whatever else, but they're fundamentally a very good nuts and bolts team as well.
Yeah, I mean, the over like you. I'm glad you pointed out there about Nienaber and Goodman coming in kind of late to the Leinster program, because that's kind of the way they've been. It's kind of a hybrid. It's kind of the whole our entire systems are kind of going from the Lancaster to the Nienaber this season, and then like you say, the season kicked off and. He joined late. We're getting used to the defensive system, and there's a lot going on there. When it comes to the execution on the day, I mean, it was just. I mean, you're talking about a kick pass from Ross Byrne to Dan Sheehan. If that's like a couple of inches shorter, it actually goes to him. You get an offload from James Lowe, and you got Gibson trailing inside him. That goes into Gibson Park. He's in. He's under the posts. There's a lot. There's a lot of inches in it there. And of course at the other end, that Dupont tried disallowed. That was literally their first attack. We're all talking about how solid our defense is going to be and how important our defensive structures are. They created that opportunity and their very, very first run with the ball from midfield after the exit after the restart. So I think Leinster's problem on the day was you're not talking about systems over a whole season. The bottom line is that for finals, you just need your big players to show up. And like with the likes of Antoine Dupont and Jack Willis, I mean, they definitely did, and they brought those big moments. We never thought when we're going into this game, we didn't think Antoine Dupont, we'd be remembering him for his turnovers. And I mean, that was it. He did a couple of 50-22s, which were amazing, and his kicking and all that, but it was the turnovers that really did it for him. But Leinster couldn't match them. I mean, especially when it came to converting into 22, that's supposed to be something we're good at. I certainly can't say Jamison Gibson Park had a bad game at all. He was just outplayed on the day by his opposite number. And this was a rare occasion where he just couldn't find that final pass when it mattered, albeit against, like we say, a Toulouse defense that was playing out of their skins. But for me, it was just a day when we weren't making the right decisions. Everyone's talking about us passing on taking the 3 points. I mean, that's true to an extent. I mean, but Leinster, it's kind of Leinster's ethos to go for that early try. And like I say, there were situations where we could have kicked it, especially when we started getting those chances. We were already 6-0 down. Making it 6-3 would have kind of made, just get the dug egg off the scoreboard kind of thing. That would have made sense. But I think arguably that wasn't the only area we fell short when it came to making decisions. I mean, just one example, like people are talking about Ross Byrne's performance should probably been brought on earlier. You can have a whole debate about that. But I'd be more concerned as to why, when he was injured, when he was clearly injured and clearly limping, why did he play on? Why did he continue to put himself in situations where he's going to be hit, he's going to be tackled? He even took a place kick. I know it was under the sticks, but still, if you've got someone with a crook leg, you don't take any risks in situations like that, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just wondering what the decision making was like. I wouldn't put this down to the systems, because we've seen the systems operate, we've seen the systems work, but it's just what you do on the day and how you react to what's in front of you in the situation you're in, and we just weren't able to do it.
Yeah, no, that's all fair. And we did touch upon in the preview that maybe some of Leinster's decisions were prescribed, especially in the semi-final, by the coaching staff. But on the flip side, you look at this game, I don't think that's something you could throw at Leinster in this game. The fact that I think they acknowledged, well, if this game is going to go to the wire, we could be going to extra time. So maybe let's just ease off on the time. And there was a big gap between, like, I think when Conan came on, I think it was, and when the next sub came on. I think that's what it was. I can't remember the exact. And like clearly that plays an impact as well. And we will get on to star players in a minute because you mentioned it. But David, you want to jump in there just before we move off?
No, I just wanted to double down on something Jeff had said about that. There was that one moment when James Lowe makes his break up the middle. And he's got two guys hanging out of him. He flings the pass inside to Gibson Park and it goes wild. How often, for Ireland or for Leinster, does that pass not go to hand? How often does that not work? Those two seem to have this telepathic link with each other. And the fact that it didn't happen on this day, and like this day of all days, is when you need that pass to go through. So it's exactly that. It's the big game players just not being able to do what they do on every single of the day. And then on the Toulouse side, I mean, Dupont was good, but Jack Willis was an absolute menace. So if James Lowe had a Jack Willis style game in the James Lowe fashion, then I think the result would have been different. But it just came down to, on the day, their star players did it, and ours didn't have bad games, but they didn't have the games they needed to have.
I was going to touch on that now with yourself, David. So I'll just jump into it anyways. You mentioned Jack Willis. Personally, my player of the match, I thought he was phenomenal. Dupont was player of the match. Can't argue with it. Blair Kinghorn, I think he had a very good 80. Extra time, probably a bit quieter after Ramos came on, which is, listen, that's fair enough. That happens. On the Leinster side, Van der Fleer off the bench was fantastic. I thought Henshaw was brilliant in particular. And Andrew Porter went 90 minutes at loosehead prop and destroyed Algary and Merkler. In terms of, like finals, they're sometimes won by heroes. So on Willis and Dupont and others, who stood out for you, or is there anyone you want to touch on in particular?
Gosh, as a standard player, yeah. I mean, on Toulouse's side, it would definitely be Jack Willis in terms of there were so many instances where Leinster Leinster kind of rely on, and Leinster and Ireland, but Leinster in particular rely on quick ball and quick work ball and Gibson Park being able to get in there fast, get the ball away and keep it moving. It stops defenses having a chance to reset themselves. It stops them and being able to prepare for what you're about to do. And Toulouse just went at the ruck like demonically. They went at the ruck. It kind of reminded me of the last minutes of the Leinster La Rochelle final last year when people were screaming for Ross Byrne to take a drop goal. And watching it back, I thought the reason he's not taking a drop goal isn't because nobody's listening to him. It's because every single ruck that's happening, La Rochelle were hitting it with everything they had. So every single player was required to protect it. I think at one point he himself had to get involved in a ruck to protect it. Toulouse were doing the exact same thing this time. It's like if you can stop Leinster, and I think it's been said before, and it remains true, if you can stop them at source, it really, really shuts down our ability to pull off the kind of quick plays that we like to thrive on. So I thought Jack Willis's work in that area was phenomenal. Blair Kinghorn was a very interesting one because Thomas Ramos seemed like almost like you couldn't imagine a world in which you weren't going to play him if you had him, for France and for Toulouse. But Blair King, and I seriously questioned why Blair Kinghorn was being signed by Toulouse. It didn't make any sense to me. They have Thomas Ramos, they have Andrew Capuozzo. So I was like, why are they signing another fullback? But he came in and he's just had this incredible season. I think when you compare him to Ramos is a sniper off the tee, but Kinghorn in attack, and particularly in counter attack, he was a menace. He was finding gaps where you wouldn't think there would be gaps. He was tearing up wings. So between the two of them, they just kept Leinster constantly off kilter and unable to generate any kind of forward momentum. On Leinster's side, God, it's hard to pick any. Not that it's hard to pick anyone out, but to say people had really key players. I'll do kind of a little bit of a twist on this. I thought Kieran Frawley, when he came on, represented a big shift from Ross Byrne, in that Ross Byrne isn't really the kind of player who attacks the line very much. He's much more of a stand back and kind of direct play 10. Frawley carried to the line a lot harder, and even in the short period of time he was on the pitch, he was taking it into contact. He was drawing players a lot better. And from that perspective, I was like, I really wish we'd gotten him on early. And I think it's a weakness of, I think it's a weakness of Leo Cullen in that I think a lot of the times he doesn't trust his bench, and I think that really affected us. I think if Frawley had gotten on earlier, we might have seen a change in play, because it was clear up till then that not that Ross was having a bad game, but that it wasn't generating the kind of forward momentum we needed. And I think if we'd gotten Frawley in there a bit longer, things might have gone a bit differently. And I think that the thing then with key players on the Leinster side is that a lot of key players didn't have the games they needed to have. James Lowe was good, but he wasn't perfect. Hugo Keenan, how often do you ever hear anyone criticize Hugo Keenan? He wasn't bad, he just wasn't himself. And the fact that he's one game back from...
Was he up to fitness, I think?
See, that's the question. I don't know. This is his, I think, second game back since the Six Nations. And he's had this, I think it's a recurring hip abductor injury, and I'm not 100% sure that he is back to full fitness, and I would be tempted for the remainder of the season. If I was Andy Farrell, I might put in a call to Leo Cullen and say, hey, you've been happy enough to keep Kieran Frawley at fullback throughout the rest of the season. Do you mind keeping him there for the rest of it? and make sure that Hugo Keane is 100%, because I don't think he is right now. He's usually such a difference maker, not only in defense and in the air, but in attack too. He's got pace. He's able to find space, and he can pass. He can fling really long passes, and if Hugo Keenan is usually operating at 95 to 100%, he was down closer to 80, and against a team like Toulouse, that costs you.
It does. And Jeff, I might get your thoughts, maybe not on an individual standpoint, but I think there's a number of factors of this game that Leinster probably weren't 100% happy with. Russ Petty's stat today of Leinster's points per 22 entry, it basically shows the more you can limit them in terms of points scored per 22 entry, which sounds really basic, the more likely they're to lose. Usually they're scoring 4, 5, 6 points sometimes per entry, like they did against like the Ospreys, for instance. But they were under 1 point this time. I think it was exactly 1 actually this week. Not great. What factors of this game do you feel, maybe not just the negatives, but what factors do you feel swung the game in terms of facets of the game? You're on mute there, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, just to make a point on just one more point on our attack, especially in the second half. We were actually getting better when it came to getting into their 22 and moving up the field. The kicking game was actually starting to work for us. I thought Larmer was doing a really good job, and I think it was Doris and Joe as well were chasing those kicks, getting to them first, batting them back, or sometimes hitting the guy who caught us, and we were able to turn it over there. So getting into the 22 we were getting better and better at that as the game wore on in the second half. It was just like we said, it was the conversion rates once we're in there. That's all part of Leinster's game. Once we're in that 22, especially front football or 5-meter lineouts, all those things, we just weren't able to convert them. We got stuck with a maul once. It was all different things happening each time, and there was a maul that was killed at one stage. I don't know if I picked one particular thing. It was just a general sense of the finding a way around the Toulouse siege mentality when they knew that we were attacking them in that in that final end of the pitch. So it was it was just down to execution. I mean, what made the game in the end, what actually, you could say that drop goal goes over right at the end. This is a totally different conversation. But then when it comes to extra time, it's literally a new ball game. And then you have that knock on from James Lowe. And then you got Doris slapping the ball in the ruck, and they're two instinctive things. I'm not saying that they didn't deserve the sanctions. Both definitely did, but they pretty much decided the match in the end. I mean, in the end, Toulouse got their one try not just because of having it one extra man, but they had two because Frawley was down. And this is what Toulouse do. It's what they do best, exploiting these situations. They like Frawley was down at one day to the end of the pitch. They knew they had this advantage. They quickly flung it out wide to the widest channel. That's where the space was, and that's where they got the try. So in the end, that created the gap that won the game.
And it also has to be said, even though it didn't work, you've got to respect the absolute stones on Frawley to try it again.
Yep.
To go for that drop goal the second time. I know it didn't go over.
He had to, though, because
he did have to, but
try, you've ran out of time by the time you're going to score.
Yeah, absolutely. But but it's still like that's it's kind of the frustrating thing, because Leo Cullen definitely seems to disagree on the subject, but that's the kind of thing you want from your 10. You want someone who's going to just grab it by the scruff of the neck and go, you know what, I'm going to keep going. It was a weakness of, harkening back to our old hero Johnny Sexton. It was a weakness of his that if he missed his first shot off the tee, that could be the ball game right there. It could take him a long time to settle. So for Frawley to have, now the first drop goal was from a long way out, and I know Frawley has the range. He came agonizingly close.
It wasn't that far off. No, yeah, exactly.
It was very, very close. I was kind of hopeful when they watched it back on the side that it had actually gone over and we just hadn't noticed. That's how close it was. But the fact that he went for it again, let him play 10, please.
Yeah. It speaks to him, in fair, and it should be said, I'll let you get your speaking there in a second, Jeff. It does speak to him, because you have to be a good 10, and I've said this so many times, you need to be playing it out half, right? And you need to have the awareness. And to be fair to him, even though he hasn't had a lot of games at 10, he had the awareness. I think the worst thing, and this is one of those weird things that doesn't make sense unless you've actually either watched tons of games or played tons of games, he probably had too much time on the first one. Toulouse did not chase. They just went, this is game over. And sometimes the best thing you need to focus the mind is just hit. It's kind of like a golfer going down the 18th or something. You just need to get it done. And sometimes that happens. But the fact that he stepped up a second time shows it didn't phase him. It didn't rattle him. And he went again. And Jeff, I'll let you speak there because he is a Leinster player, and I should give you your
No. Listen, I mean, one good takeaway is that we went for it at all because, like I think has already been said, it's drop goals in any situation, any match. It's not something Leinster and Ireland have really done that much over the years. It's not even. It doesn't even look like we've even trained to have a system to do it. And when it's ironic because when you're playing against a top 14 side, a lot of times the away team has the ball under the post in the first 5 minutes. They'll pop over a drop goal and then go, to get the scoreboard ticking over. Different mindset. We're going for the fight. But my thing is that you have to have the play there. You have to prepare for it. You have to be ready for it. It's like special teams in American football. You need to know, okay, this is a good situation. Make the call, drop in the pocket, pop it over. And I was delighted that he went for it. He was just out by, it reminded me of that semifinal against Toulon way back. I think it was Gopperth just at the end there, just missed. Similar situation. But listen, and like you say, fair play that he went for it a second time as well. It's a small victory, but it's good to know that we're actually able to go for it anyway. But listen, I totally agree, needs to play more 10. Definitely should have come on a lot sooner into this situation when it wasn't even happening, because he has offered a different look. He came on against the Ospreys a couple of weeks ago, and you could see he was running wraparound plays. You could see, look, this is my chance. I want to show what I can do in this position. And even when they got a try against the Ospreys right at the end, he wanted to get started quickly again and have another go at it. So he's keen, and he signed a new contract. So we might see more of him next season.
And I don't know if you noticed there at the end of that Ospreys game, when I think it was Jamie Osborne kicked it long and it bounced into touch. Mm-hmm. If you look in the background, you can see Frawley, and he is disgusted.
Yeah.
Because he said, I went to all the effort to run and take that shot, and I took it quickly and I nailed it. And then you kicked it away.
Yeah.
But that's the attitude you want.
That's exactly what you want. Yeah, he's raring to go. So just a question of how often we use him.
I've been critical of Kieran Frawley. Well, not of Kieran Frawley, because I've made this point before. I think Kieran Frawley's a good player. I think Ross Byrne is a good player. I think Harry Byrne is a good player. Sam Prendergast. I think the problem is that the second they get 2 minutes in the blue jersey at out half, you have swords from the Irish rugby media circle being like, oh, that's it. He's the man. That's it. Just give him his crown now. And it's like, that's unfair on the guy because it was too much pressure on him. To be fair, Frawley took his showing today. And I think, in fairness, Ross Byrne, he probably just hasn't shaken off. It was a really annoying injury that he got with that pec injury. And like, they're the ones that you just, sometimes you don't get right from for a full year, or sometimes a year and a half. It's just one of those. But like, give credit where it's due. Do I think he should have went to Ulster to get those minutes of 10? I do. That's my own personal opinion. Everyone sees it differently. That's fair enough. But we'll wait and see. Maybe he will be Leinster's 10 next season, and this isn't a conversation we'd be having a second time. Or if we are, it's in a different light. But Jeff, you touched on it. I think it was yourself, Jeff, that touched on it about, keeping the scoreboard ticking over. And David, it's something we're going to get into at the start, but just how conversations flow and all that. A lot of people from Jim Hamilton, Alan Quinlan, I think the RTE panel as well, very critical of Leinster not taking their threes. Personally, I felt with how the game was going and how it was unfolding, I felt like they were right when they went to the corner, when they did at different facets of the game. What was your thoughts on it, kind of feeling the game from a distance?
The dream team of Jim Hamilton and Alan Quinlan right there. I thought the first time we did it, it was the right decision, because usually Leinster get up into the 22, and even if we don't attack off the maul, it's a weird thing because we have Dan Sheehan and you associate him so strongly with mauls, but like 70% of the mauls we make, even attacking mauls in the 22, we don't actually try to drive for the line. We get it off the top as quick as we can and whip it wide. So I thought it was the right decision the first time, because in a game that was shaping up to be as tight as that one, if you could get a try, that gives you an instantaneous edge, and suddenly you're ahead in a way that your opponent can't make up for with a penalty shot. I think as the game wore on, we should have adapted faster. And I think that's what you need from your players in moments like that. Like I know we had Sean O'Brien on the pitch at one point. I know we had the world's most qualified water boy coming on and giving advice at points as well. But you need players in the moment to be able to go, this isn't working. This is a Champions Cup match. Tries don't matter, points matter, and however we get them, we get them. We had Ross Byrne on the pitch. He's a very good kicker. We should have been taking them earlier. I think the first time we went for it, yeah. But when it became apparent that Toulouse's small defense, and that was something that was talked about in commentary, Toulouse's small defense was excellent. When it became apparent that Toulouse's small defense was not going to let us through, we should have started taking kicks.
And one man who stood out in those small defense, to use his name again, was Jack Willis. I thought there was one in particular that he just, listen, is it 100% legal? No, but no more defense is 100% legal. So let's not get nitpicky. But they did defend it very well. Personally, I just said fair enough, but I understand what you mean. I know when James Ryan came on, he very much had an attitude of, listen, we have our foot in their throats. Let's go after them. Let's go after them. And I think that ties into what a lot of the modern coaching principles are in this day and age. I think you see it with like lineouts as well, where it's like, right, we're under the pot. What we're going to do, I'll take it on myself. And that's it kind of feeds in. That's kind of the general overarching theme. And I think, listen, are you going to get it right every time? No. Is it going to be a results based argument no matter what you do? Absolutely. It nearly always is. And like, I think there was, yeah, I think to your credit, I think there was one or two times where you said, okay, maybe take the points here, especially when after Ross Byrne got hurt, that you mentioned kind of midway through the second half or whenever that was. That's probably where you start going for threes more because he's not getting the kicks like he's not getting within 10 meters sometimes of the touchline. You're not going to score from there. Realistically, it's the hardest place to score from is 10 meters out, especially with how the attack was going. So that's probably important. We're going to move on because.
Can I just make one point on James Ryan?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, no. The only thing I'll say about that is that with going for the threes in the first half, I know there's no way of obviously doing this, but I think Leinster needed James Ryan in the second half last year, and we needed him in the first half this year. When he came on, the line out just suddenly they threw the first one to him, and I think we only actually lost one line out in the first half. I didn't see the actual stats, but
I think so, yeah.
But they were still kind of messy. They were still just that little beat that was missing, and that when you've got a move going, but then when Ryan came on, it was almost like clockwork. The throws were on the money, and whatever the play was going, and that could have made a difference as well. But I just thought his contribution when he came on, and he basically took over the captaincy as well. You could see him leading the team talks under the sticks, and when there was little breaks in play and all as well. It was just a shame we couldn't get two full games out of him over the two finals, but sure, it is what it is.
No, it's important to know, and I do think it's funny how you mentioned that as well, because I think sometimes who's listed as captain doesn't make an beeswax much difference. Like you could name, I don't want to disrespect, but say Jordan Armour, because wingers aren't generally captain. You can name him captain, but it doesn't really make a difference. Like it's about whose actions stand up and who speaks well, and like I see it with Munster now at the moment. Like Peter O'Mahony and Ty Byrne are both brilliant speakers. So too is Jack Crowley. So too is Craig Casey. So too is Alex Dillon. It doesn't really make a difference who's listed as captain and who's doing the coin toss. I understand there's talking to the referee and all that, but how often does that really do happen?
There was a point where James Ryan tried to talk to him, and I could hear Carly over the ref mic going, "You're not the captain," and then you can hear James Ryan going, "Caelan." He's calling for Caelan.
Tell him what I just said.
Tell him what I just said.
Yeah.
I mean, at least he's figured out how to work Matthew Carley at this stage, as opposed to when he was a bit, dare I say, grumpy in the pissing rain in the south of France earlier on in the competition. And I do want to touch on Carley. It's good that you mentioned him because there has been discourse online, and I'm really going with the inverted brackets there, about his performance. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was, listen, do you get every call right? No referee does. They reckon there's about, I think someone said there's about 200 calls in a rugby game that have to be made, and you could give up to 100 penalties if you really, or 80 penalties if you really, really wanted to in any given rugby match. I thought there was great flow, but I think what really stood to it was, if you said to me before the game how is it going to go, based on the Matthew Carley and how the teams would adapt to him. That's exactly how I would expect them to adapt to him. He's not the most technical. He will allow a contest at the breakdown and a little bit of a feud, if you will, so that you will get this quick ball. And it will become this kind of English style. And I go back and forth in this. I kind of like English referees when it comes to breakdown. I kind of don't. They do prefer technique being rewarded. But I think both teams prepared for him. I think maybe it's just hindsight or whatever, but I think the fact that Jack Willis played well with an English referee is there's probably something there as well, because he knew how to deal with him. And I thought, listen, the game was a wonderful spectacle. He had an unbelievable performance. I thought, like, the RT commentary were going mental over I can't think which try it was. Sorry, it was the red card first, and then the Van der Fleer try, about how long they were taking. But
yeah,
it was clear, it was concise. The same thing we don't say week in, week out when we watch these games. You could tell what the process was. You can tell what the framework was. They got the decisions right. In those two instances in particular, I thought it was a really good performance by them. And I know Andrea Piardi was one of the touch judges. I can't remember who the other one was. Piardi was definitely one of them. I thought it was just a really good performance.
I think it was Carl Dixon.
Was it? Yeah, I think you could be right. I think it was Dixon, Piardi, and then Tempest as TMO. I thought they had a really good game. I don't think anyone should really be listening to any conversation that says, oh, referee this, referee that, because how often do we turn on TNT Sport at the weekend and we hear them on about, oh, referees' interpretations? But like, both of these teams had 2 weeks to prepare for an English referee, and they got exactly what you'd expect from an English referee.
I don't like talking about referees, especially after my team's lost. I don't think there's plenty of rugby on our side of the ball to talk about as to why the result was the way it is. And like, the only thing I would say about the team officials as a whole were those decisions you're talking about, which took so long, just for the sake of me blood pressure. That's all. Because I mean, there were times when the ball was clearly touched down over the line. It was clearly a red card, and they kept looking and looking. I know they want to get it right, but they're showing the replays and replays again. You're just saying, bloody, did you get it right? But it's clear. Can we just move on with the game? That's it. That's not even a criticism. Like you say, they want to get it right, but overall, you can't. I've seen all that criticism. It's the ref. It's the ref. It's the ref. It's not. That's just too easy a thing to go to every week. They make as many calls that help your team as ones that go against them.
It's probably worth noting as well. They took about, give or take, 3 or 4 minutes for the Van der Fleer try, right on the stroke of extra time, halftime. Here's someone like Gibson Park or Hugo Heenan who did the full 100 minutes. Those 3 or 4 minutes are an absolute godsend.
That clock was at 17 or something by the time they actually stopped that.
And I think it was scored about 13 or 14.
Yeah.
13 to 14 minutes. So like, if take Gibson Park, for instance, probably the most running, the most aerobic position, you must be thinking, at least I got an extra 4 or 5 minute rest before, because you're out on your feet at that stage. I know it means nothing, but we were saying before we hit record that extra time was a game on its own, and it was really entertaining. I know it's bittersweet for you lads, and I do recognize that, but really entertaining. And Jeff, I'll start with yourself, because if Leinster were to come back and win this, if they had done it, the Richie Arnold red card wouldn't have been one of those major swinging points. An absolute baffling moment. Like, you just don't need to do it, especially when the penalty's already won. I want to get your thoughts on that, both your thoughts on that, actually. But firstly, what was your thoughts on the first half of extra time as a whole, and how Toulouse just wrestled back momentum?
Does that mean I'm not going to be given the opportunity to give out about Matthew Carley? Is that what's going on here?
Yes.
You're being frozen out. We discussed this ahead of time.
Okay,
that's all.
There's a certain group chat that I'm just very glad is private, because otherwise the man might have a restraining order out against me.
Yeah, but like,
I guess we'll leave it at that.
David, you know my opinions on English referees in particular and their interpretation of scrums and breakdowns. But if I'm standing back and thinking, do you know what, it probably helped a good game, I'm just saying.
And it wasn't scrums and breakdowns. I have three bullet pointed instances, but editorial control is what it is, so I'll defer to you.
Exactly. Censorship is mighty. Anyways, Jeff, I'll hand it over to you. Prepare, you might get muted.
No, I mean, no. The extra time period, like I say, it was a brand new game, and it was, and everything was going. It was all about who blinked first, really, and there was that low moment. That was the moment. You can't argue it was deliberate knock on. You can there's a lot of people talking about incidents earlier in the game that were similar, that weren't given, but that was then. That's gone. This is the moment. This is the game's tied, where it's looking to see who's going to score first this extra time period, and it is what it is. And then, of course, like you say, a minute later, Frawley goes in. I think it was Kinghorn he was tackling, and he just got cocked in the head. Another question mark: should he have stayed on? After that, he got his bell rung, and even more credit for going for that drop goal later on, considering that was going on. But anyway, listen, he's down on the ground. Toulouse ship it wide, and all of a sudden it's a try. And that, any other time, that breaks the back of the game, especially when they go even further ahead after that. It's a 10-point lead in this 20-point period of extra time. How it became if you when they went 10 points ahead, if you said, well, this is actually still going to be a serious contest going into the second period of extra time, you just wouldn't have believed it. And then, of course, you had that Roy Arnold thing, which was just incredible. I saw Church reel back at as it happened, and I thought maybe he was trying to milk something, or maybe he was trying to exaggerate something. But when you see it the second time, it was crazy situation. There was no need to do that at all. And you'd be raging if you're a Toulouse fan. And it was a clear red card. There was no questions at all. And that's just the way it was a question about, they let us back in. And to be fair, we went and we scored. From that, I mean, there was a lot of drama and a lot of tension, a lot of looking at the team mouse. But bottom line, we got the try. We brought it back to a 3-point game. And if you could argue going into that second period of extra time, knowing Lowe was back on the pitch, we were really in a good position to win it, because from the second half, we'd shown that we could create scoring chances. And now this was going to be a 10-minute period with an extra man. But then we go and give away not one, but two penalties in their half. One after the other, and it just sucked the momentum out of it. I don't know what Doris was over the ball, was over the breakdown, doing what he does, trying to disrupt. I mean, you talked earlier about what Toulouse were doing in the breakdown. We were trying to do that as well, that Ninaber South African thing, just make the breakdown a chaos as much as you can. He was in over the ball, but then he just saw the ball there, and he just batted it back. It's not what you do. It's
fatigue error, isn't it? Like, more than likely, it's fatigue error.
And I guarantee you, he's replaying that over in his head right now. And it's nothing on him. He actually did have a good match overall. I thought he was a good captain as well overall over the knockout phases when we didn't have Ringrose or Ryan. But listen, he that was the making of the match. And then the Healy penalty. That it is what it is. Just, you're in those situations. You got to watch what you're doing in and around the ball. And listen, that was a 9-point lead. We're never coming back from there.
No, that's ultimately what it came down to. And David, I'll get your thoughts. You can give me your thoughts on the red card first of all, if you want, but then also like that frantic opening 10 minutes the second half. But then Leinster, as Jeff alluded to, they fell away. It was 3-point gap, then it was 6, then it was 9, and then it just felt like game over. I might just get your thoughts on extra time as a whole, because I have another follow-up question coming up. So just the red card and extra time.
So for the red card, I mean, I thought, look, they get to the right decision eventually, and at the end of the day, that's the important thing. It takes you a while to get there, as Jeff said earlier about the Van der Fleer try. I'm sure they all appreciated a bit of a breather. It was definitely the right call. My only critique, and this, I'm going to slip this in under the radar, you're not going to stop me on this one. My only critique is that it had to be called back and pointed out to Carly that it had happened. But if you freeze frame on the moment, he's watching the ruck as it's happening. So I don't know if he's looking to look. Rucks are busy places. He's looking at all kinds of things. He's probably looking at where the ball is, trying to see where people's hands are. But that happens right in front of him, and it has to be called back and pointed out to him. That being said, it was called back. It was pointed out to him when he looked at it on the big screen. He made the right call, and the right decision was made. And I almost, not that I wouldn't fault a player for the offending player, because this is the kind of thing we're trying to cut out. It was very far into a very intense match, so mistakes like that are gonna be made. Michael Alatoa did a similar thing to Cologne at the end of the La Rochelle match last year. The thing about extra time was, I think Leinster kind of got caught out a little bit in our 6-2, in that in that we had, and not just the 6-2, but in our over reliance on our first 15. You know, Leinster often get talked about as having a lot of strength and depth, but the fact that Andrew Porter went, what, 90 minutes, the fact that Jameson Gibson Park was still playing in extra time, like, it was very clear that Leo Cullen didn't feel he could trust the replacements he was bringing off the bench, which, yes, Porter is probably one of the best loose heads out there, but when the replacement is Keane Healy, you know, one of the player with the most caps in European rugby, you know, it's just that's got to be something that I think has to be addressed. Extra time doesn't happen very often, but I think it has been a fair criticism of Leinster over the course of the whole season that they haven't always trusted their bench as much as they possibly should have. I think, and you know, as an example of that, this is Leinster's third final in a row. It's their third loss in a row. It's the third time in a row that Kieran Frawley has been named on the bench, and it's the first time he's actually come off it. So I think when you get up to that level, it doesn't have to be extra time. It can just be a really, really, really intense game. And if you can't trust your bench in the last 20 minutes, you're giving up a huge advantage to an opposition who can. And I think that's something that cost us, because as good as Andrew Porter is and as fit as all of those guys are, you need to be able to trust the guys who are coming off the bench. You need to be able to deploy them earlier. And I would have hopes that someone like Jacques Nienaber, you know, coming from the Springboks, you know, the originators of the bomb squad, the originators of knowing how to deploy a bench like almost nobody else, that is something they can address going forward, because we didn't have X factor to bring off the bench. We, you know, we had a bench except for James Ryan and Josh van der Fleer. We had a holding pattern, and I think that really went against us.
And I was going to ask a follow-up question on that, but I think you've answered it pretty well. And so, Jeff, I'll throw it to you. Like, do you think there is kind of a trend emerging here with Leinster and that bench, or do you think it's just a case of there is such a reliance on certain key players that sometimes that step, I don't want to say step down, because that's really derogatory to players like, say, Keane Healy or Jack Conan or Josh van der Fleer. But do you think there is kind of that element of there's such a reliance on your Gibson Parks, your Porters, your Keenans, even Dan Sheehan to a degree, which I feel like Ronan Kelleher had a better Six Nations than he has had a season in blue, for instance, which, you know, people might argue there. What do you think it is? Do you think it's a trend? Do you think there's, you know, key players? Do you think it's not trusting the bench? Do you think it's not deployed right? Which way would you lean?
No, I think our problem over the years has just been an over reliance on pre-scheduled substitutions. It's like it just doesn't work, especially in a final. It works against maybe if you're in the URC and you have a feeling, you know, okay, we might have the bonus point in the bag by halftime or something, and then we need to give this guy rest for a game next week. I mean, that's all part and parcel of the way the season works. But when you're in a final, you have to play the game that's happening, and I think Dave's absolutely right. We didn't. I mean, and I go even further to say I don't know if we would have seen Frawley at all if Ross Byrne wasn't injured. I mean, maybe
he was unused last year, wasn't he?
Yeah, he might have gone into the. He might have gone into.
He was unused in the last 2 years.
It was only if there was if there was an injury anywhere in the back line except for scrum half, he was probably going to be brought on. But it's to keep that kind of talent out of the picture, especially when you know he's a different kind of out half. That's the key thing. It's a real, things aren't working. We haven't scored a try. The Toulouse defense is on top. This guy can come on and do a completely different look. Like I said earlier, running wraparounds, showing different plays, giving different looks to the defense. So, to come on at the 50th minute, a lot of people saying Ross Byrne halftime. I don't like doing that. Like give him a few minutes after the break. But when it's still going on and we're still not getting any purchase, that's when you make the change. It's a bit, those are the big calls that have to be made on the day, as opposed to scheduling it. So I suppose that's a habit that's happened with Leinster over the years, and we're still doing it. So,
no, absolutely. Jeff, were you going to jump in there, or like moving on?
Yeah, I just one thing on the bench, and this is, I don't know, I've seen anyone else say this. This might sound like a little bit of a radical call. I think it was a mistake to start Will Connors. And I think it was a mistake because I don't think, honestly, I don't think he should have been in the matchday 23 at all. And I don't think it's because he's a bad player. I think it's because the ideal back row for that game would be to start Ryan Baird, Caelan Doris, and Josh van der Fleer. And then you bring Jack Conan off the bench, shift Doris to 7. And that's the three that finish the game. You could see that Ryan Baird was really annoyed to be coming off the pitch. And I think he was right to be really annoyed to be coming off the pitch. He should have been playing the full match. He's good enough to play the full match. He's the kind of player who's going to make a difference in a full match. And I think it was a mistake, not because of Connor's quality. He's an excellent player, but I think our best back row, the 6-2 split has a lot of attraction because there's an attraction around bringing on, more forwards and having that extra oomph and extra impetus. But I think the point that was always made about the bomb squad was the bomb squad only made sense because South Africa had 6 forwards who were just as good as their starters. And I think the best back row for Leinster is Baird, Van der Fleer, Doris, with Conan coming in pretty early, like maybe around 50 minutes. You tell Josh Van der Fleer, go out there, empty your tank for 50 minutes. We're going to bring you ashore. Caelan Doris is going to go to 7, and then Jack Conan is going to come and wreck shop from fullback or from number 8 for the final 30. Ryan Baird is young, he's fit, he's strong, he's fast. He should be playing full 80. And I think if Leo Cullen ever returns my calls, that'll be my tactical advice to him.
Wait until you realize that there are people who have tried to write letters to Leo Cullen before, and the phone calls do not seem all that bad.
I once bumped into him when he was taking out the bins, actually, but that was besides.
And did you give him your insights?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I gave him. He's a very tall man in real life. I just
don't
gave
start
him a nod.
Connors.
I just gave him a nod and kept walking.
Well, it'll be an upward nod because you're the same height as me, so we're both quite a bit,
Exactly.
quite a bit off. But it's funny you mentioned that as well, because I wrote a piece recently. It was after Munster beat the Bulls, and I was talking about the 6-2 and Munster's how they deployed John Hodnett and Alex Kendall, and very similar. But one of the things I did touch on was they were perfect for that 50-30 split, because one of them will go out there and they're attacking into the ground. The other person will carry with a bit more oomph. And yeah, that's kind of what you're getting from Connors and Van der Fleer. But I think the difference is Hodnett and Kendall, is there much between them? No. I think ultimately Josh Van der Fleer is one of the best back rowers in the world. Yeah, I think he'll hold his hand up and say he hasn't played the best in finals up to this, up until yesterday, where I think he was really, really good. But I think there is a point where you have to draw the line and say, how do we get our best players on the pitch? And ultimately, Josh Van der Fleer, like realistically, if you're asking me, I think Josh Van der Fleer and Caelan Doris need to be your 80-minute men. If I'm being brutally honest, I think Baird and Conan then are the ones that interject, and you rotate from there personally. And even from some of the clips I've seen of Leinster, when they're playing such a narrow game plan, Ryan Baird at 6, honestly, I think just deploying from the bench. I understand, they didn't have Maloney and different things, and he didn't have James Ryan, so probably Baird had to kind of start. There's that element. But when Leinster are playing this kind of narrow attack without edge forwards, without that space for Ryan Baird to roam in, I'd probably have left him in reserve on the bench as well, to be honest. And then he does bring that little bit of ballast, so you don't have to start Josh Van der Fleer from the bench. Then, there is that element. And I know Bernard Jackman was on RT yesterday, and he got chatting to one of the bagmen for Toulouse, because as only Bernard Jackman would be doing before Heineken Cup final, and he said they genuinely seen Van der Fleer on the bench as part of a 6-2 as being right. They're really going to try and take us on for power, and teams don't take on Toulouse for power. And I'm conscious of time. We do have to touch on Toulouse before we go. Jeff, I'll throw it over to you. Remarkably, that is 9 straight finals won by Toulouse since 2008. It's 6 European titles. I know we use the phrase "come at the man, come at the hour" so often in sport, but it kind of does apply for Toulouse when it comes to Cup rugby.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you look at remember the Top 14 final from last year, how they just won that in the last play of the game. I mean, you cannot, as Leinster fans, like I say, I'm still in the mindset from the game, but we're critical about our side of the thing, but you can't go too much on that without praising their side of the ball as well. I think Leinster, just quickly on the Connors selection thing, I think Leinster kind of held on to the La Rochelle playbook and thought it might work as well, but it's Toulouse is a totally different team. It worked well against La Rochelle. We got that monkey off our back twice, But to lose a completely different team, we could have used Van der Fleer as well for those early lineouts as well. He's such an important link man in those situations as well. But listen, that again, that is what it is. Toulouse, full of praise for them. They really showed on the day. And they did exactly what you'd expect them to do, and we just gave them too many situations to let them do it. So, and worthy champions.
Absolutely. And there's an element of Toulouse. Like, I know friend of the pod, Hugh Griffin, had a very viral set of tweets comparing like rugby teams and soccer teams, and Toulouse was Real Madrid. If Toulouse or Real Madrid, it especially applies when it comes to finals, because they must have some voodoo magic. They just managed to get over the line, and it doesn't make sense sometimes. Like, they've lost 2 European finals. One of them was because of a bounce of a ball, and one of them was to Munster in 2008, which was the last one that they lost, and that was just a nip and tuck final, kind of like this one, kind of could have went either way. Lads, I appreciate talking about Leinster and the defeat, but I wanted to finish on a positive, like we so often do on this show, and I want to touch on kind of the state of the game, because so often we talk about, oh, it's floundering here and it's not successful here, but it was a European final in a stadium. Yes, it cost £1 billion to build and all that, but it's an unbelievable stadium hosting 60,000 fans. Nothing to be snuffed at. It was an unbelievable game of rugby. Jeff, I'll start with yourself to close out our European coverage for the year. Where do you think rugby, but in particular European rugby, is at as the season draws to a close?
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to make this a positive. Like I said back at the start, my head isn't exactly in a place to look at things so generally. But still, listen, I do appreciate this was a final for the ages in a superb stadium, no question. If you just looked at this one match in particular, you'd say European rugby is just fine. I mean, obviously, a lot of people, we can't forget all the talk about, the Champions Cup format and, how we've lost 2 games in the pool stages. Over the years, a lot of people want to go back to the 6 pools of 4. It's how we get to this stage. There's a lot of good teams. There were a lot of good teams throughout this tournament as well. I mean, La Rochelle, they may have fallen back this season. They're not having a good season, but you saw Bordeaux. We thought they'd get further than they did. 2 Premiership sides got to the semifinals. So, overall, there were some exciting matches throughout the tournament as well as the final. But I suppose, well, one bugbear of mine, I'll just get this out there. This is one bugbear of mine going way back, is that I just wish it, in an ideal situation, I wish these tournaments could be played from start to finish in one block. I know it's not possible, and there's a million different reasons why it isn't. But you get this situation where coaches are selecting which tournament they want more. You saw that 90-0 win for Northampton a couple of weeks ago, and all these teams have these selection issues. Have to pick from one week to the next. But listen, overall, ideally, I'd like a better pool stage, more matches in those early pool stages. But and there's the argument as well of the South African teams. Have they been an addition? We see the Sharks winning. The Sharks won the trophy, so I think that's been a good thing. They need to work out the travel arrangements as well. There's a bit of work to be done there, but I think it's in a pretty good state right now.
I agree, and I've been critical of the EPCR era, and I stand by that. I think from an administrative point of view, TV contracts, how they sell it, even just something small like, the intro that they have on TV now, and it looks like it's the AI or computer generalized, and I just don't like I don't like things like that. I want old highlight reels before match comes on. Like, that's just me. And so I'd use any stick I can to beat them with. But at the same time, when you got finals like that, when you have like, I think it's fair to say some of the best referees in the world now, because we got South Africans on board as well. Unbelievable games, great buy-in. I think the identity is still there. Like, I think it's beating slowly, but there's still a heartbeat in it. So I think it's important to focus on that. David, closing word for the year from yourself. European rugby, is it stronger than maybe when we entered the season back in December?
I think European rugby continues to produce winners who are very clearly the best team in Europe. And I think if that's your goal for European rugby, that's who's been winning it. You go Toulouse, La Rochelle, Toulouse, Exeter. They had in their great year. Saracens, Leinster. It's consistently the top teams winning it, and I think if what we're looking for is to try and get the best teams in Europe, people can hem and haw and complain about the round of 16 and how much does it matter. But I mean, does it matter any more or less than if you had an extra pool game? I don't know. I don't think it's unfairly tipping the scales in one direction or another. For me, I think the quiet winner of this season, outside of obviously the loud winner, which was Toulouse, the quiet winner of this season was Harlequins, who got all the way to was it the quarterfinals or the semifinals? They got all the way to. They'd never won a European champion. They'd won. I think they'd won in Challenge Cup, but they'd never won a Champions Cup knockout before ever. And then they went on that run, and I think while we still get the juggernauts being the ones who finally end up winning it, the fact that a team like Harlequins can have that kind of run in this year, the fact that a team like Sharks, who have, if you look at their domestic season, have had an atrocious season, can still rally themselves and go on to win in the Challenge Cup. I think there is both the element that you get the best teams, the cream rising to the top, but there's always that opportunity on the outside. The thing I kind of actually like about the extra knockouts is 80 minutes of knockout rugby, anything can happen. So you add an extra layer of knockouts, and suddenly you can have teams who maybe otherwise wouldn't have gotten as far, just working their way up the ranks. So as a product, I think it's pretty good. And I had never heard the suggestion before, but I actually really agree with Jeff. I think it'd be really cool if the whole thing ran as a single block. I think that'd be pretty awesome. It's never going to happen, but it'd be awesome.
No, absolutely. I completely agree, gentlemen. I will leave it at that because it's been brilliant to get your thoughts. I know it's not easy. We've all been there, but it's been brilliant. And not just to yourselves this afternoon, but to all the guests who've joined us to talk European rugby over the past 6 months, I think it is now, or just over 6 months since we started this season's coverage. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening as well. We'll be back on these airwaves with the culmination of the URC season, with lots to talk about, plenty of Irish interest there. We'll also bring you unrivaled coverage of the summer of rugby between Ireland's tour to South Africa, the Under-20 Rugby World Cup, and of course, the men's and women's sevens teams at the Olympic Games. In the meantime, you can find me this week on the Red Army podcast for all things Munster in the URC. If you do like what you see here over here, please do like, subscribe. You can leave a review, tell a friend, leave a comment if you're on YouTube. But for now, and until next time, a bientôt.